Good morning. Welcome back. You're watching the program, and this is the continuous edition of the extensive coverage of COVID-19 or the coronavirus, epicentered in the city of Wuhan in Hubei province in China, spread across the world to Europe, to Asia, Latin America, and now in the African continent. At home here in Kenya, so far 4 confirmed cases. And there is, of course, an option on the table, which according to the CS Health Mutahi Kagwe, if the virus overwhelms the healthcare system in the country, then a total lockdown or shutdown is inevitable in that particular regard. I'm joined, though, for the next 1 hour by Dr. Alvin Juma, who is a physician on my far right. Dr. good morning. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate your time. At the center is Farah Maalim, the former Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly. Yesterday night, he hosted 2 doctors on his Speaker's Gallery show here on Ebru TV. On my immediate right is Dr. Joseph Rotich, economist, and we'll be taking a look at the perspective of the economic pinch that the Kenyan economy, as well as the global economy, continues to feel in regard to COVID-19. Before we get deeper into the discussion, let's also have the cartoon edition of the Daily Nation here on air in regards to hand washing, the sanitization, what you need to do if there is no sanitizer, or in the event you run out of sanitizers. Then you can use the tap water or the sanitizer or the soap, which many Kenyans can access. That is the last defense line against the virus, which continues to spiral, and in that case shaded in green and is coming. Therefore, it's an interpretation of a football-like pitch where between the goalposts is the person in the protective gear, and if the tap, the sanitizer or the soap then hits the ball, which is the virus, will be able to manage and stop the ball from, hitting the back of the net in regards to the footballing aspect here, which is the control measures as now adopted by the government. Dr. Alvin, if I may come to you then, in regards to so far the processes adopted by the government with regards to the continuity of the process they issue, taking up the responsibility, and the video that we just had in terms of bringing the understanding of the public and wanting them to know more about the virus. What do you make of it, and what do you make of the government's response so far and the capacity?
Thank you for having me. Yes, I think the government has come out in the right way in urging people, one, to wash hands. As you've seen from the video, it's actually like a chain process, and we need to break the chain. And part of breaking the chain is to make sure we clean our hands as often as possible, avoid touching each other, avoid touching our faces, particularly our eyes, our nose, and our mouths. That way we prevent cross-infection of this virus. Now, the measures the government is putting in place are actually good. The self-isolation or self-quarantine, shutting down schools, people being urged to work from home so that we avoid crowding. When you have an infectious disease, you want to avoid many people being put at risk in one particular space. So I think it's very good measures. Okay. And Honorable Farah Maalim, if I may come to you, with no prospect of a vaccine in the next 6 months, as per, of course, the efforts put in Germany and the United States of America, in regard to our healthcare systems, the probability is that a total lockdown or shutdown is inevitable as per the projections given by the national government. What happens then? Is that enough to contain? And what happens to Kenyans who have no sick leave, who have no medical cover or medical insurance for that matter, and the inequity which has been brought forth or laid bare by the COVID-19 or the coronavirus crisis?
Lockdown, if the situation warrants, is an option that's there, and we have to do it. Let's just watch the number of additional infections right now. If this starts spiraling out of proportions, then a lockdown becomes inevitable. You have to do it. The economic implications, I cannot even imagine. You can't fathom the economic implications. There will be a total collapse of the economy. I mean, China has lost more than 50% of its own economy as it is today. And you know, China is the second most powerful economy in the world. From roughly, is it between 16 and 18 trillion dollars GDP. You can only imagine this year half of that, or maybe even less than that. So you can imagine the impact it has on 1.4 million, population of 1.4 million people. And then some of them...
1.4 billion.
Billion people. And some of them had been living in more or less like a third world, environment. China is not a first world in the sense of the first world like the United States of America. It's an industrial giant that is pretty much moving very fast. But again, you still find pockets that are pretty much like third world countries in Africa and everywhere else. So the effect on that already in China is powerfully devastating.
Okay.
But the beauty of China is that they have managed to stop infection completely. I mean, one person
as of Sunday.
As of Sunday, only
and
one.
that was outside the epicenter.
Yes, only one in that kind of a population. It means basically they've done such a fantastic job. So ours should be prevention at this stage now. Let's even the idea of saying that Kenyans can come back to the country and a number of other measures that the minister announced, I think is a little bit hasty on that. It's a bit very tricky. If you get 100 cases in this country, you can rest assured within 45 days you'll be talking about thousands. And then God forbid, we cannot deal with anything more than maybe 200-300 cases. Our ICU system itself is limited. It's less than 300 beds, ICU beds in the whole country.
Yes.
And our health sector will literally collapse within the first couple of days. So the best thing is, even if it's going to be a lockdown, you're better off with a lockdown than a fully blown situation like it happened in some of the industrialized countries like Italy. So we can just pray and work towards what the minister is saying now, with accepting the issue of inviting back Kenyans or people who had residence permits and the rest of it. I think it's a little bit too soon for us to go in that direction.
Okay. Dr. Retich, from the economic perspective, when you look at the developments in Europe, when you look at the developments in the United States of America, so far this morning, as of yesterday evening, the American government will pump about $1 trillion to the federal and equally the national economy in the United States of America. At some point, Donald Trump misjudged the situation. Here in the country, there are some who are calling for a freeze on taxes to save Kenyans at this time of need and calling on President Uhuru Kenyatta to take that decisive action. However, how do we flatten the economic curve in the country in terms of Kenyans feeding from the same trough that majority of Kenyans who used to live below $1 a day will be further affected and will be further deepened into the crisis because of this coronavirus pandemic in the country? Therefore, do we need stimulus from the Central Bank of Kenya to liquidify the Kenyan economy at a time of need when we are likely to expect job cuts and job losses across the country?
I think the problem that we are facing as a country is a very delicate one, because even as we are talking now, we are talking of an already overburdened economy. We are talking of an economy whereby Kenyans are paying over 57% to service the debts, and only 43% only to gather together for the needs of the country. And now that we have this pandemic, what's happening now, the corona issue, the government will have to realign its budget. It will have to reallocate some of the finances which would have gone to development to service the impact of the pandemic that the country is actually facing. So the issue of the government waiving the taxes, especially in areas affected heavily, like the tourism sector. Those who have actually invested in the tourism sector, they are the ones which are actually feeling a lot the heat. There are also those who have invested in the industries whereby they are relying more on the international or imports on raw materials. So all this has actually negated the development of the country itself, so that the country now is focusing on the most essential things like sustaining the security as far as the coronavirus is actually concerned. So it is a matter of the country. It is not a question of whether the country will waive the taxes or not. It is actually something that is necessary for us to do it now if those countries are, if those industries are to continue.
Okay, all right. Let me go to Dr. Alvin Juma here, because as was the case with the SARS or the MERS, the coronavirus pandemic was not controlled at source, and that is simply because of the Chinese government's misjudging of the situation then when it underestimated the consequences. Now we have it all over the world, and the global community managed to contain the SARS and the MERS in 2003, the pandemic. But like the swine flu in 2009, this virus will be here to stay. Now, what are the lessons we can learn post-COVID-19 in terms of our healthcare systems in the country? One, all Kenyans getting access to affordable healthcare. Two, revamping our healthcare systems. Yes. Three, address the issues which have been laid bare by this virus in terms of our capacity with regards to the ICUs, with regards to what might forthcome next. And then four, the lessons we can learn in terms of research and innovation and give the Kenyan doctors the capacity for invention, the capacity for research, the capacity to help Kenyans, and not what the government does culturally, as is the case with acknowledgement and appreciation and underpayment of doctors.
Well, thanks for that question. Well, we've learned a lot of lessons from this pandemic. I think the most important lesson we've learned is to stop being over-reliant on China. And basically the whole world, including the United States, relies heavily on China as a producer of raw materials for medication and health consumables. So at the moment, even China is trying to use, its hold as the global producer of medication to leverage against countries like the US. And for us, we basically just have to go by what they say. Right now, you have people who are, instead of keeping supplies in Kenya, we're actually exporting the things that we need back to China because China, they say...
Because of the crisis.
Exactly. We want this stuff. We gave it to you, so give it back to us because we need it more than you. So we need to become kind of self-reliant in terms of production of medical supplies and I guess, many other things that we... that are important to our economy. Now, in terms of health personnel, we saw nurses at Mbagathi threatening to go on a strike.
Yes.
I mean, these are people on the front line. And if you're not given basic things like personal protection equipment, no one is going to put himself or herself at risk. So the government needs to invest in these things. And I think where we slept was that we saw what was happening in China, it moved down to Europe, and we were not preparing ahead. We started reacting when we had our first case here. Instead of learning lessons from other people, as you said, people really underestimated the extent of this COVID-19. They were thinking it's just like any other flu, but it's not any other flu. It's something which has not been seen since 1918 during the Spanish influenza. So we need to take it seriously. I think we need to invest in healthcare. You've said about the health sector. Yes, as the speaker here said, if we get to not even 100 cases, as you're suggesting, 20 cases, I mean, the whole healthcare system, in my opinion, will just collapse because we don't have facilities, don't have the capabilities. So we need to invest in a centralized health system, something like the NHS or something that is controlled by the national government. Right now, every county government is putting in place its own
isolation, its
own directives. We don't have any centralized kind of directives that, these are the Kenyan guidelines, this is what we should all be doing, this is how we should mobilize people. Everyone is doing their own little thing. So in case of a full-blown local pandemic, this thing can really take us to places we've not even imagined to be. Okay,
I'll come to the age demography here in regard to the breakdown of the people who are more vulnerable, especially people who are elderly and have chronic illnesses and have a poor medical history. But Homo Farah Maalim, if I may come to you, in regard to the communication channel so far issued by the government, how clear is it in your view? And how does the government need to earn the trust of the public in this case? Because the concern is that while the government continuously updates the country, the other worrying bit is that at some point, the Minister of Transport and Infrastructure, James Macharia, castigated the efforts done by the Kenyan who shot the video of the Chinese plane landing. And now we have the cases here at home. Therefore, how clear, concise can the government be? And up until now, where we are in regard to the presses issued from Friday last week when the first case was confirmed, on Sunday when the president confirmed 2 more, and yesterday 1 more case confirmed by the Minister Mutahi Kagwe. Is that satisfactory in terms of earning the public trust?
I think there are 2 things. One is the Trump syndrome, the syndrome of trying to wish away this thing and say, no,
a flu, just like
a flu, not a big deal, and the rest of it, and then looking at that macroeconomics and saying maybe by instituting certain measures we might lose more economically. I think that was the Minister for Infrastructure and other people. But I think as soon as this guy came into the scene, Mutahi Kagwe, he came out much more realistic in the manner in which he's approached it. So I commend him for that. Of course, the other one is a sad, very sad way of looking at these things. But the point I'm trying to bring here to the fore is that we cannot afford. We can afford to have a certain economic downturn. But we cannot afford, in the unlikely event or the likely event that we have 1 or 2, 3, 4, 5 cases slipping through these things and then picking up very fast. I've just been looking right now at the video on how this thing can be contracted. One person can infect 100 people in a day.
Yes.
So the cost in the unlikely or likely event that this happens, that somebody slips through, and we say, okay, no, let's not create panic, and the rest say, okay, let's not create panic. But seriously, this is a panic situation. If you have a problem, the best way to deal with that problem is to face it. And we are with the problem now.
Okay.
So I think the government, and by the way, let me tell you one thing. The earlier we get the medical services back to the central government, the better.
So you're calling for
I'm calling seriously for those
management of the health docket by the national government?
Completely by the national government in its entirety. In its entirety, with that central planning system and everything else. Because right now, if this thing goes into let's assume, we only have it in Nairobi today. But for argument's sake, if you start getting cases in Kericho, in Kisumu, in Migori, in Garissa, and the rest of it, and the central government, all it can do is regulatory and advise, effectively expecting the county governments, because that is in their own devolved, what you call the docket, the county government to deal with that. What the county government has zero capacity to deal with that. So it's in a sense, what Mutahi Kagwe is doing is good, but there has to be a national mobilization of resources. By the way, as Dr. Rotich had said, we don't have money. We're broke. We're literally broke. We will have to look for a way in which the international, our own international obligations in terms of debts and the rest of it's concerned, is probably suspended for a given time of period, so that we do not have to meet those obligations and pay those debts. Because
in this time of crisis.
In this time of crisis, 57% of our ordinary is already going into servicing the debts of information. It's not paying the debt.
Okay.
Service the interest alone.
So we only
the interest alone is about 5%. Yeah, we're left, and that goes for wage bill. It goes for the essential services that cannot be suspended, like policing, security sector, and all these things, maintaining our own armed forces and basically certain structures itself. So we are broke. We are completely broke. So if it's going to be a choice between putting certain money in a hospital to deal with coronavirus cases, or paying the salaries of our servicemen, and women, then of course we are in that kind of a dire situation. That's one thing that really people need to come to terms with it.
And the problem is, in the absence of the services you have mentioned, then there's always the possibility, as pointed out in The Economist last week by the Economist paper, that instability.
Yes.
I mean, when there's no policing, when there's no order,
absolutely,
when there's no administration.
I mean, the whole what do you call crime is going to spiral out of central CBD. Is not going to be the CBD you knew. You'll be the gunfires. Yesterday, actually, we did see a very
there were gunfires in central
central because of crime. And when poverty bites so much so that people cannot even feed their kids and their families, then desperate things are going to set in. So it's one thing leads to the other, and we will be in a very sorry situation. And the earlier we begin preparing for all those things,
the better.
The better. And the earlier we never take a chance in bringing anybody into the country, whether it's somebody who has a residence permit or it's somebody who's a student returning, until it's all clear on the other end. For example, for China, and the Chinese in another 2-3 weeks' time will be able to clear everybody. I think all those students, those who were sick would have been treated, and those who have not been infected are going to be ready to come back when they're clean.
Okay.
So why not wait for a few more weeks?
All right. Dr. Richard, then if I may come to you, many economists across the globe agree or equate what's happening in the world, apparently the pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic, as having the same effects of the 2008 financial meltdown or crisis across the globe. Therefore, how do we mitigate the Kenyan economy that's already ailing amid accusations of mismanagement and mishandling by the government since 2013?
I think looking at the whole thing, I think the crisis that the country is facing now is how to control the coronavirus. That is the basic thing that the government actually dealing. Any other mitigation measure to do the economy, you see what is now in priority number one is to control the spread of this disease. And whatever little resources that we have, we must converge into that particular whatever, the pandemic. But you see, you also have to look at these things. We have other related issues like security. The insecurity that is actually on the rise because of everything that is happening. Then you talk about the collection of the revenue has been going down for some good time now. Even as we are talking about the 57%, we are talking about the 43%, we are talking about the 43% of the decreasing collection of
which
revenue.
Continues to decrease.
Which continues to
KRA
decrease.
hitting below the belt.
Yes,
by
hitting below
far.
the belt.
Okay. At least 400 and something billion Kenyan shillings.
Which,
below target.
Which is still according to
One-
ACC, and
1.8
the,
now.
and the treasury ends up in private pockets. I mean,
Well,
But you see, the issue of corruption
I think
is
the
a
economy
different
has,
thing altogether.
the economy has completely shrunk. The economy has shrunk. Real estate is gone to hell. There are a number of places that have shrunk. So it's not entirely because it's going to private pockets. It's because the economy is shrinking.
okay.
Yes.
What causes that then? I mean,
Bad policies.
Where do we need the liquidity in terms of lubricating the economy with regards to the scratching of the surface for the Kenyan dollar?
You see, as it is now, we cannot afford to prioritize on other things other than
Except health.
the control of the virus itself.
And prevention.
Because you look at it, like what the Americans are actually doing. They are pumping the resources into the system that is already ailing. But do we really have the capacity to do that? We don't have. So what we are actually doing now is to do the control. And Kenyans will face it rough. As we are yet to experience hard economic times ahead of us because of these things. Now that the people are in their homes, you talk about the informal sector, which is actually the backbone of this economy. And now the informal sector is more affected than any other sector. Majority of our Kenyans are actually in the informal sector. So in this case, it means once these people are out of their jobs, you can also expect it will also impact it negatively on the collection of the revenue. You talk about the tourism, which is actually going down. You talk about the industries which are running down.
Airline industry.
Yes. And you talk about the airline industries that is actually running down. Where do you expect the government to get the resources? Definitely, the collection of revenue will drastically go down to the knees. And the Kenyans will have to face it the way it is.
What happens then in the event there is total lockdown or shutdown to Kenyans who live for the day, especially in a gig economy where many Kenyans depend on digital platforms? I mean, we have the Uber drivers, the online taxi drivers generally, and the deliveries that are done online. What happens to the common man?
There are two things that you have to decide on. You decide to remain indoors and you die. You decide to go out and die out of coronavirus.
All the same you die.
So all the same you will die. So Kenyans will decide to go out, do their business for them to earn. That is basically what is going to happen.
What happens? Because if there's a directive and say the government deploys the military.
The government has got to invest both the available resources as well as any external resources that can be found to begin mitigating food stamps, whatever they call food stamps, or distribution of food, distribution of all these essentials, the things that you really need to have for you to survive. So we need to have tons and tons and millions of tons of those ones to be given to all the vulnerables. All the vulnerables. Okay. And that cuts across the whole country. Let me tell you about why our economy is shrinking. Our economy is not shrinking because it's of coronavirus. No. For 3 years, we have been warning about the bad government policies that contributed to the shrinking of the economy as we have it
including
today.
the IMF warning.
IMF warned. When we were overborrowing, massively overborrowing. And you know, when you overborrow like that, the consequences are there. Secondly, what did we do? We discouraged all the investors who were here, people who were in the real estate. For example, one of the areas, and I keep repeating this thing, and I just hope that Kenyans do now understand the cry that I always used to say.
Okay.
One component, one fortunate blessing in disguise that we had, you know, sometimes in the misery of some other people, it becomes your own blessings. was the collapse of the Somali state. And we literally had all the money that belongs to Somalis going through this country.
At the height of the sanctions.
Right from the first time in the 90s when we did not have
the multi-party
struggle, and World Bank was not giving us anything.
There was no aid totally for about 10 years.
There was nothing. But we still had excess liquidity in terms of convertible currencies, dollars here in the country. Because Somalis were remitting to their people all over. And Moi was such a fantastic guy. He allowed that. And then, of course, Kibaki's time. Kibaki literally said, don't touch the Somalis. Mudawura.
Yes, Ambassador Francis Mudawura.
The sage, the wisdom, the wise guy that I don't know how we're going to replace him. And if Uhuru is watching us right now, he had better get him close to him as soon as possible to help him on some of these things. Now, we dealt a blow to that. They're now all over. In Addis Ababa, they are in Kampala, they are in Kigali, they are everywhere in the world. Let me tell you one thing. Now, what happened, I'll tell you, we were the gateway to the countries, the landlocked countries, and all the importation used to be done. We disturbed them on those importations. We kept their oils and their containers for years in Mombasa port. What did they do? All they did is that they shifted to Uganda and they shifted to Tanzania. Instead of Ugandans coming to buy from here, in the olden days, now Kenyans are going to go and buy from Uganda. And who are the businesses who are importing that? The same people who were here before have shifted.
Because of
150,000 families have shifted to Turkey and other places.
Because of tax frustrations.
Because of frustrations, because of envy, because of jealousy, because of stupidity. You know what I mean? Basically saying that, Somalis are taking over the country. I mean, that nonsense is the kind of stuff that was there, that was going there on that time. What do we have today? We have a situation in which you have to travel to Tanzania to go and buy from Tanzania. We have to buy from
back home.
And come back, get it back here into the country.
Okay, Dr. Alvin, if I may come to you from the medical perspective, that's just an economic breakdown of how we need to stabilize the situation in the event there's total shutdown or lockdown. What happens to the majority of Kenyans who are poor? What happens to the majority of Kenyans who live below $1 a day if the situation gets out of hand or will spiral out of control? Give me an understanding from the medical perspective as to the demographic breakdown in terms of the age and people who are susceptible with regards to chronic illnesses, with regards to the age differences, with regards to the immunity level, and what needs to be done by the different demographics within the society.
Well, just before I answer you directly, I can just weigh in on what my fellow panelists have said. Well, I think a total shutdown will be inevitable if we do not comply with the current directives by the government. Driving around town, I can see everyone is going about business as usual. There's still gatherings, people are still going to churches, to mosques. No one is heeding to the calls. This thing is very serious. And I just came back from Europe about 2 weeks ago, and I was in the heat of things. And it's a very serious thing, to the extent where hospitals are being shut down and only catering for coronavirus patients. So here we don't have the capacity to do that. We have a broken healthcare system. So we need to weigh the options. Do we contain this thing right now, keep it at 4 cases, or do we go around assuming everything is normal, business as usual, and if this thing blows out of proportion, what will we do? It will definitely crash this economy as we know it. Going back to the demographics, I'm sure most of us are following the situation in Europe, and you can see, like in Italy, where most patients who are unfortunately dying from COVID-19 are elderly patients. So you're getting patients over 65, people with hypertension, diabetes, cancer, underlying health conditions, and younger people, especially people who are smokers, because the thing affects the respiratory system. So if your respiratory system is not that good, you're likely to suffer more. So for the younger population, and we are lucky in Africa, the demographics are, we have most people under the age of 35. So I don't think it's going to be that serious in terms of mortality because most people are young and fit. But we need to take care of the vulnerable in society. So the elderly, the ones with other existing medical conditions. So for you, actually right now the advisory from CDC, WHO is young people are the key to whether this isolation or these measures put in place succeed. Because if you contract as a young person, I'm sure you've seen many footballers are posting up photos on social media.
They're doing well.
Yeah, they're doing well. They're at home. Nothing much is happening to them. That's what we should be doing. We should be seated at home, because if you go, for example, and visit your grandparents or your parents, and they have one or two other medical conditions, then you expose them. They'll get the thing, but they're not going to react to the same way you react to it. They're probably going to be sicker,
Affected faster.
requiring hospital care. And as Mheshimiwa has said, we have limited ICU bed capacity. If we get our elderly, people who have comorbid conditions in hospital, they're going to break the health system. So let everyone take this thing, personal responsibility. Let's stay home. As they're calling it, social distancing. Let's take it seriously. Let's stay at home. And if need be, I would encourage the minister, without causing any panic or any fear, if we get to like 10 or 20 cases, in my opinion, a lockdown would be very warranted, because in Italy, for example, they hesitated to do that.
And they pay the price.
And they pay the price.
Yes.
So other people are learning from, it's actually called, Italy is a case study. Everyone is looking at what the mistakes Italy did and trying to correct.
Not to repeat that
Not
mistake.
to repeat the mistakes. So I think if we get to 10 cases, we should have a total shutdown.
Okay, and of course, notwithstanding the fact that the lion's share of the Italian population is elderly, as is the case with other European countries, except for Albania, which is the only country where you can find a household with an average people of about 5, and about 5, 6 there, averagely, because Germany is even susceptible with regards to 40 to 55 years average age of the German population, and that perhaps might explain why Angela Merkel always turns to the Syrian population in terms of providing energy to the German economy, which is the biggest in Europe, and apparently is taking a hit. Now, Dr. Richich, let me come to you, Honorable Faraman. Dr. Richich, given what you're witnessing at the moment, what many countries are doing, Kenya including, or what should we be doing from preventing this health catastrophe to be an economic crisis with an already ailing economy as per the stimulus required? And at what point will the Central Bank of Kenya come in? And how do we lubricate our economy at this time of need in regard to the concerns which were yesterday raised by parliamentarians for tax freeze on essential issues that Kenyans should access? And is that level attainable?
I think away from the government actually getting involved in buying food direct for the citizens, I think they can remove the taxes. The 16% taxes that are taxing all the goods, I mean especially the foodstuffs, should be removed. Once that one is removed, at least those who have the capacity to buy, they can buy at a cheaper rate than what it is now. But what I'm actually dwelling on, as it is now, is that the government, I don't think it has the capacity also to remove some taxes, because that is the source of what is oiling the government now.
The VAT, for example.
Yes, the government cannot create even the little resources to sustain the security that it has for this problem that we have, unless they also tax. Because there is no other place where the government can get the revenue apart from taxation. Yes. So if you tell or instruct or rather advise the government that you remove all these taxes from the tourism sector, from industries, from the, I mean the taxable capacity bracket, where do you think the government will get funds even to do what it is doing now? And let me tell you, the resources have been diverted from the real hard development to the solution of what we are actually facing now. Because we are now investing on development. Whatever had been budgeted for development, now it is being realigned or diverted into this emergency that was not actually considered. Okay. So it may not be very easy to ask the government to reduce the taxes or rather remove the taxes, but what we can say, I think what Mheshimiwa said, that the foreign debts and the domestic debts should be held at first with a special request, so that whatever we have, we can converge it to this problem. Okay. And then again, I think what the government also should do, we should learn more from China. You see, China was the first country to experience whatever we are experiencing
But they misjudged the situation
with
regards
because
to
even
advice.
when you talk about the ban of the flights direct from China and all this and that, our government was not really in a hurry to do that. after a long time when they realized, kumbe, this thing was real. So it is the other day when we discovered, kumbe, it was real. So what we can do now is to go back to China and learn from them. How have they managed the cases or the new cases? How have they managed to the level where they are now? Because that is the only way we can succeed. We cannot succeed without involving those who have experience, those who have resources. Now, if we are talking about even the mouth cuff, those masks that you are talking about, we don't see them, you don't find them. Yesterday in Eldoret, I went to some supermarket. I was looking for sanitizers. I could not even get one. And people were queuing asking, where are these things? So people are dwelling on the soaps, the ordinary soap, Banga soaps and all those. If God will really assist us to do that one, that is the main thing.
Which, according to microbiologists, is even healthy and helpful.
Yes. So what we are saying, we cannot afford all the mitigation measures that the government has proposed. They are very good and they are wonderful. Okay. But are they available to the public?
Okay. Honorable Farah Maalim, yes.
Yeah, you know what we did? There are a number of things we got wrong for a long time. Instead of building our industrial base, instead of building our manufacturing base, for as simple things as the liquid, what they call sanitizers that are there, we import these things from outside.
Including toothpicks?
Everything. Because it became easier to trade. This started, of course, it's taken a long time, started right from the early 90s and the late 80s by destroying the sugar sector so that you can easily import sugar into the country.
That is in western part of the country.
Make a kill. And that was very easy for people to
Isn't it irony then, Honorable Farah Maalim, that the president has manufacturing as part of an element in his Big Four agenda, yet the country is not producing at the expense of what you earlier mentioned, frustration in terms of taxes, high cost of production, and now other countries in the region becoming a hub for the investors who are fleeing the Kenyan market.
You see, I'll tell you some things that are very, very strange, and I'm glad these things are coming out into the open. I remember in 2012, 2013, when we were campaigning for elections, Jubilee always used to say double-digit growth.
And the digital duo.
Yeah,
at the time.
double-digit growth. You see, when they were saying double-digit growth, they did not tell us the areas that they're going to tackle and say, look, we'll do this in this area. We'll deal with the manufacturing sector. We will do this regulatory regimes and enact these laws, which is going to make it impossible for people, and they're going to put up punitive taxes on that so that we can build these sectors. We can be self-sufficient in the production or the manufacturing of this or that. And they never give us. All they did is just, you sit down there and they say, we're going to put up so many stadia. We're going to give you a double-digit thing. We're going to give you laptops. So it's like, and Kenyans, we are so gullible that we do not even ask these people, how are you going to do that? Because the policies were never put in place.
Okay.
These are hard things. When you really want to develop your country, for example, if you remember, you are young, and the professor remembers, I think Dr. remembers, India had banned for a very long time in the 70s and the 80s the importation of cars into the country. And that's how Mahindra and Maruti and all these other things came. When South Korea, the first time came into the do you know when they had this guy who was called the general, Park Chung-hee, who was the father of the lady who is now in prison.
Who is now, yes.
In prison. And he came here to Kenya. And he borrowed a debt of 800,000, less than £1 million from Kenyatta, to enable his own delegation.
Oil his economy.
No, to enable his delegation to travel around the world.
Okay, that's South Korea.
And yes. And then in the late 70s, these guys were manufacturing the Hyundai. Today, their vehicles are the best all over the world. I mean, it's got an economy that is 60 times, I think, probably. Because what is the GDP? It's about 2.7 trillion.
That is dollars.
$2.7 trillion. And ours still at 70 and getting less and less. So they're about 40 times or 30 times, 40, close to 40 times more powerful than our economy. You can put that. So what I'm trying to say is that we have persistently, continuously used a social value of deceit at the apex of the political class in this country.
I think,
and that has now is when we are facing the music. Now is when we are facing the music. But the reality of the country is that this country has been sabotaged by its own leaders from day one, from the first time when we got independence until today.
Okay.
So we created rich people That's why if you right now tell me who's the richest person in the country, everybody will tell you the richest country is the first family, which was the first, what do you call, family. Who is the second richest family? We only say more richest, and the third, and the third progressive.
Until 10. Okay.
So this, it became a social value, a social value to basically grab.
All right.
So this country needs a revolution, a social revolution, a democratic revolution, for us to go back to the basics, to be able to reclaim it. Otherwise, we're done.
Okay, given that, and then explains perhaps why, Dr. I'll come to you and Dr. Rich equally. In regard to the economic perspective, I'm sure you'd like to supplement what Farah said. We're going on break, and then Dr. will be able to give us his explanation point in regards to the crisis, the coronavirus pandemic, and of course, the measures that we need to adopt and what we can learn from the contingent we deployed in 2014 in the western part of the continent in Africa to contain the Ebola outbreak that killed many people at the time. And this explains perhaps why countries in Europe, for example, have social welfare programs, and people, when they stay at home, for instance, in the Scandinavian and in the UK, then the government will pay you with no, of course, pinch or stress or stretch on the economy for that matter. The number is 07914788990, the hashtag on Twitter. New Day KE, the short SMS code is 40920. We are coming back after the short break with the last bit of the discussion here on the program. Stay tuned. Good morning. Welcome back. You're watching the program. Thank you for staying with us here on New Day Kenya. The continuity of the extensive coverage of the coronavirus crisis or the pandemic or COVID-19, which was epicentered in the city of Wuhan in Hubei province, spread across the world and hit home on Friday last week following the confirmation of the case by the health CS Mutahi Kagwe, and 2 more cases confirmed on Sunday by President Uhuru Kenyatta at the doorsteps of Harambee House, and yesterday a confirmation of yet another person who tested positive, bringing the total number to 4 here in the country, with the possibility of a total shutdown or lockdown, as hinted by the CS Mutahi Kagwe yesterday when he said that if the health systems are overstretched, overstretched and could not be able to cope with the situation, then that will be the last option which is on the table. But to what effect is what we're asking here on the program as we continue to educate you here on New Day KE every morning in the continuing coverage of the coronavirus pandemic. Therefore, before I come to Dr. Rotich and Dr. Alvin, let's get to hear what the CS Mutahi Kagwe had to say in effect to that presser yesterday issued, and our reporter Winnie Lubembe was there.
The latest case was confirmed today at our National Influenza Center laboratory. The patient is reported to have traveled from London, United Kingdom, on the 8th of March 2020, arriving in the country on the 9th of March. Results of the 25 plus and additional 23 other persons who have been tested have all turned negative. All the 23 from Bagathi Hospital, we have cleared them to self-quarantine at home. When the Public Health Act has been invoked, quarantine is not a voluntary measure. It is a mandatory measure which can lead to a big fine and a jail sentence. This measure at the airport is going to be instituted further by making those traveling into the country to swear a legal document that they will comply with what they are supposed to do. It is always on the table. You know, a total shutdown is always on the table, because depending on on how we see the progress, depending on how we monitor the situation, then, and also we are monitoring with the Ministry of Interior to see to what extent the public is following the guidelines, along the guidelines that we have given. At the point where we think that the danger is enhanced, then you take the necessary, the committee will debate and take the necessary steps.
Dr. Alvin Juma, in regard to that, before I come to Dr. Rotich, and sort of the argument has been communism winning over socialism in terms of how China managed because of an order. An entire province was locked down. And you hear the minister saying that it's going to be mandatory and they might attract jail term or even fine. Is it a desperate measure in a desperate time? And you talked about the issue of decentralization of the testing points. How effective is that, and will it lessen the burden on the national government?
Yeah, I think the minister was warranted to, I think we could call it a threat this time to Kenyans, that if they do not comply, we risk, being put under lockdown. Because, as I said earlier, people are not taking this directives seriously. It's like, most people are taking this as a holiday. We've been given time off work, time off school, early Easter holiday. It's not dawned on most of us that this COVID is in the country. It's a serious thing, and we need to take it as such. So that being an option on the table, and the minister quoted the Public Health Act, which is actually true. It's not like a request I'd ask you, or don't come in because you have a running nose, stay at home. No, it's something obligated in law that you're in quarantine, you must stay in quarantine for the stipulated 14 days. Now, that said and done, it's still a matter of someone practicing goodwill, knowing that if you go out, you came in from abroad and you're roaming the streets of Nairobi or of this country, you're putting the rest of the public at risk. One, because we are not testing, unlike in most of these countries where testing is extensive and it's decentralized.
Okay.
We are not tested. So if I'm not tested, for example, I came back from Europe, no one has tested me. By nature of my work, I cannot self-quarantine, but I think I'm fine. But if you're not testing me, how do you know if I have COVID-19? You cannot tell by just looking at someone. You need to be tested. I personally don't think the government has capacity to test all regions of Kenya at one go. Their lab does not just have that capacity. So in my opinion, they should certify labs across the country, partnering the way they've done in the US, having PPPs, public-private partnerships, with hospitals and that are accredited and provide these tests extensively, so that if you have a case in Mandera, for example, you don't have to, again, fly there, take the samples, bring them to Nairobi, wait again another 24 hours to get them back. It could be done in the referral hospital there, or in a certified lab. We have the likes of Lancet, we have big hospitals in this country which have capacity to and are credible to do these testing. Yeah.
Yes, Dr. Richard, you had a point with regards to, in responding to Honorable Farah's statement before we went on break.
Farah was talking about what was our priorities, or what should have been our priorities actually. You talk about our country being industrialized. Huh? It's among the items of the 4 agendas of the president. And what he was actually explaining is that there is a missing link that we may have actually encountered some years back. You can remember, my friend, when during the Moi regime, the issue of a motor vehicle, which was actually introduced, and it just died stillborn.
At some point,
yes, it never picked up. So when you talk about coming up with industrialization, you must equally come up with the necessary, not necessarily policies again, but the capacity. You capacitate the citizens to be able to take over the challenge. Because when you talk about the coming up with industries, behind you, you must have people who will drive, the driving force. And the lasting solution that the country should have is the manpower. So are we prepared enough? Have we prepared the necessary manpower that can drive the industrialization as we are thinking about? Because it will be just a policy. It will be just the government pumping the resources into what has actually been brought about.
Okay.
But will it last without the preparedness, the necessary prerequisites that would drive as a behind driving force of the success of this industry? So there is a need for the government to look into that, the manpower. If, for example, you are talking about countries which have developed. You talk about Korea, you talk about China, you talk about all these other countries which have actually developed industrially. Do we really have the capacity as a country to send our youth to study in this the international industries, how they have developed, how they have grown up, how they have, wherever they are now, so that when they come back home, they will occupy that capacity and having the figure and the power and the knowledge to drive our industries.
Yes.
You see, when you want to develop your industries, you must protect that industry first. You protect that industry through a legal regime. For example, you stop all the importation of sugar and give a challenge to the sugar industry and the sugar sector itself growing to produce sufficient sugar for the local consumption. And
which will pile pressure on them.
Of course,
okay,
of course.
Okay, so
you see, you do that. Or else you put in what is called punitive taxes. The punitive taxes is to discourage people from bringing out from outside. It becomes too expensive. So then they will revert to manufacturing locally. The same also goes for the car industry sector and all these others. We imported millions of second-hand cars, the junks that the Japanese wanted to get rid of into our own country. And we keep on spending a lot of money on spare parts. You see what I mean? No country, no country that wants to industrialize will allow such things. So, but then because there's quick money in it, and that those politicians right at everywhere are interested in that quick money. The movers and the shakers of the country at that time, the people who basically run the regime, want that money, then of course they will look around for other ways and to making quick buck, but the country suffers. It suffers, and we've been suffering, and now very soon we'll be overtaken by third-rate, countries that went through military coups and what have you, and the rest of them who are democratizing and also industrializing and who are basically trying, you have people who worry about their own country. Look at Ethiopia, for example. Look at Ethiopia. Look at all the people, right from Haile Selassie when they got rid of the king. The king, or the emperor for that matter, was somebody who was enjoying life when his people were dying in Wollo. Millions of people were starving in Wollo, and he was spending $35 million on his own celebration of his own inauguration, celebration, and Bedel Bokassa. Remember the king of Central African Republic? And they were overthrown. But in the case of Ethiopia, you can say whatever you want to say about all the subsequent rulers that came in place. But one thing is they're patriotic. And these are the common people who have climbed into those positions. And they are out there with a mission to completely change the state of their country. They got their own SGR faster than ours, double lane, for cheaper than what we did ourselves. And longer, by the way, by far. All the way from Djibouti, all the way down there, and longer. But here is that you have to take into consideration
400 kilometers,
30% or 40%, what you call, or padding of those things. But so because of those things, on the overall, these things that are happening right now are basically giving us a wake-up call and telling us, look, this country cannot survive the way it has survived for the last 60 years. You must come up with changes in this country that essentially are not parochial, not inward-looking, not the creation of a... And I was just telling Daktari, when in this country, it doesn't matter how somebody makes money. As long as you have the money, you're a hero. You're worshipped by your people. You know what I mean?
It lays bare corruption, greed, and that has been of course, the start point, the wrong footing that we had in 1963 when we gained independence. And you look subsequent years down the line until 2020, the concern is that, again, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission and the National Treasury have equally said a third of our national budget goes to private pockets. I mean, coming to you, Dr. Alvin, given what we're witnessing at the moment, it lays bare to some aspects of the government.
I just wanted to weigh in on what he said about decentralizing the testing, what you call kits itself. I agree with him entirely. We can have a very powerful regulatory, what do you call
by the national government.
By the national government to regulate it, to keep on making sure that they have the right standards. But this business of saying that we limit these things is, in my opinion, a wrong thing. Every county government, every private entity that wants to put up those things should be allowed to do that at this stage.
Sawa sawa, Daktari. Then the point is that it also lays bare the corruption that is rife at the Ministry of Health. For instance, we lost 5 billion Kenya shillings at some point, as per the reports issued by the Auditor General at the Ministry of Health. No action was taken, and it continues to be a thorn in the flesh of the government. Again, the other concerning point is the government's micromanagement of a devolved function, which again base layer the cooperation between the counties and the national government. At the epicenter, at the fulcrum point, lies the coronavirus pandemic. How do we balance both ends of the divide here in the midst of the calamity now and post-COVID-19 or coronavirus then come together, coalesce around a cause and address the health issue in this country?
Well, I think the COVID-19 is offering an opportunity the same way the Nairobi County gave back its functions to the national government. I think the county governments right now should give back the functions of health to the national government. You know, it's a state of health emergency, and it should be managed by
central planning.
By the central government. County governments don't have the resources, even the personnel to deal with this thing in the right way. We have some counties where there are no doctors, they're all fired. So if you have this infection getting to those counties, who will manage this, you know? So we need a health service commission. It works worldwide, you know. Health is a central function. We can devolve some things like immunizations and all that, but the core business of running healthcare should be a national function.
What he's saying is true, because if you look at the county governments right now, you see, when we devolved some of these things to the counties and we created a devolution, it also became ethnic segregation, ethnic enclaves. So the top, what do you call, medical professionals who would have been running those places are not running. You have the right clans and the right, what do you call, tribes and the rest of them who are there. Nurses are the CEOs. You know what the CEO is? They're the chief officers. The chief officers. Nurses are in some cases, and clinical officers are the CECs.
High school dropouts advising the governor.
Yeah. It's places that should have been run by professors and subspecialists or super specialists. They've all been, and because they don't come from there. I mean, Daktari doesn't come from Garissa or Wajir or Mandera. If he was doing these things before, and the moment this devolution came in, he was told to go back to Zom. You see what I mean? And then they're not recruiting doctors because they don't want to pay the money. And corruption is much more. It's actually tripled
at the counties,
at the county level than it is at the central here. One of the ministries that were very well professionally managed. I know that there have been a lot of corruptions in the procurement, but right from the days Professor Meme was the director of medical services in this country, and I remember him that time, and he was from outside this world. Dr. Kimani came. Dr. Kimani did such a fantastic job, and he took the health, what do you call? He promoted health in the four corners of the country itself, very professionally. Of course, later on with the digital stuff, I remember they did not even want to give him an extension of 2 years or 1 year as a contract, and they got rid of him to bring young people there. Young people who barely had any experience. Some of them a first degree, and then they got into public health, and that's it. That's enough to make them ministers, and the rest of it with hardly any experience in the area. So if we can get some of those qualities, I don't know where Dr. Kimani is. Professor Meme is dead, unfortunately. Professor Muga is somewhere, at least in one of his home areas. They were smart enough to call on his expertise and his own knowledge. But the reality of the matter is that this thing has got to be centralized. If we don't centralize it, then we have a problem. That sector is suffering.
Yes, Dr. Ashish.
I think with the health sector remaining within the county government is long overdue. Because looking at it now, the way the coronavirus is being managed, it is being managed by the national government. Everything that is being done now, every directive that is being given is actually within the docket of the national government. That is why the minister is running all over, giving instruction about ABCD. So I think we can rightly say the national government should bring back the health sector if it has to be properly managed. When we talk about the corruption is everywhere. And it has to be dealt in another forum. That is a huge thing that cannot be discussed as a single, in a single ministry.
The point is, this disease, these trying times are equally a blessing in disguise in talking about corruption equally, that's crippling not only the health institutions, but equally all government institutions.
And that is why we are saying, I know corruption is there. And let me tell you, my friend, everything that we call unfortunate in Kenya, it is a harvesting time for some individuals. Get it from me, because
every misfortune
that happens
has a silver lining for some.
Yes. So like what is happening? Say today there is a big accident that has happened that has killed about 60 people, for example. the security people will focus on that, and they will reap out of that. In the next 2-3 weeks, they are making billions of money out of that. So you cannot say the corruption will be removed in such a situation. Like now, the corona issue. How many people could be harvesting in corona issue? So it is something that Kenyans must accept, that corruption is there, and we must deal with it squarely. So the EACC should come up and live up to date. So that I don't know whether we still need a new constitution to cap the issue of corruption in this country, because I believe we have
enough legislation.
Yes, what we need is a legislation to put this thing in the rightful perspectives. Otherwise, if we say, oh, corruption, oh, it's like we are sanitizing the corruption itself. Because by talking more and more and doing less to cap the whole menace, we are doing nothing to help the whole situation.
Giving it more coverage and leverage, isn't it? Yes, Dr. Ali, as you finish up with the last comments here, in your view, one of the most advanced countries in terms of the medical field is Cuba, where immediately after the handshake in 2018, the president went there with Health CS Cicely Kariuki, and the Cuban doctors were into the country. Then we had deployed them across the counties. And one unfortunate situation was the kidnapping of the 2 Cuban doctors from Mandera County, who reportedly are still alive, but in an Al-Shabaab territory. Have we learned from them? Is there any lessons that we archived from them that can be of help in this trying time?
Well, Cuba is one of the countries that has invested a lot in primary care, and that's what we need to do. Personally, I was for the idea of Cubans coming here, but they should have been like advisors, facilitating rather than taking up full-time jobs. So we need to build a robust primary healthcare system instead of investing in more referral hospitals and tertiary care. Because primary care, right now, if you had a very good primary care system, we'll be able to know, where suspected case X, Y, Z is, what we need to do for that case. A system built from the ground up. Now, that said and done, we've not been employing doctors after internship for the last 2-3 years, yet we have a public health crisis at the moment. I'd have wished for the minister or the president right now to issue a directive to employ all those doctors who are out there who don't have jobs, even if it's on a temporary basis, because if this thing hits us like full blown, we don't have, as I said, the capacity to deal with it on the ground. Maybe in Nairobi, yes, but we have so many doctors who are jobless, who are tammacking out here. So we need to learn from Cubans, where you employ a lot of primary care doctors, build up a system, less investment in tertiary care. You can actually centralize the tertiary care, but primary care needs to be on the ground across the country so that the minister in Nairobi can pick a phone call and ask Farah Malim in Garissa, how are you managing his hypertension, if he's hypertensive, diabetic, and he will know. That's how Cuba runs. But at the moment, we really don't know, even I suspect the minister doesn't know what cases are going on, let's say, in Kakamega. If you asked him, are there any suspects there, he probably doesn't know, because we don't have a chain of communication or a chain of command. Everything is up in the air.
You see, the primary care is if you can get your primary care right, you can easily cut down your own medical costs by 50%. Because this is mandatory testing, for example, for all sorts of things. There's certain diseases like cancer, for example, which can be detected much earlier.
That's true.
And so you primary care basically is maintaining the right nutrition, maintaining the right cleanliness, maintaining the right, what you call, sanitary situation, so that there are no infections. You see, all the diseases are diseases that basically come about because there are certain things that are not going right. So if you can invest a small amount of money into those things, you don't want to treat them. And that is an area that we have never given sufficient, attention, yes. And this diagnostic kits, not just for that, for all the diseases, the possible diseases that essentially is going to need massive investments into it to treat some of those diseases. It's much more easier. And everything. For example, we had such things like NTSA and the Alcoblow. and the safety belts and the seat belts and the rest of it. How many cases do we get? How many people die? How many people are sitting right now in hospitals because they have a spinal cord injuries because of accidents and because they did not do the right precautions on those? So there are all these things that are supposed to be done that are never done. They're never done in the country because you need a system, you need a clean system to do that. And our system is rotten to the core.
To further point out that the hotline numbers provided by the government are not functional. Yes, Dr. Rishi, as you finish up briefly.
I think, let me say, I must appreciate the minister, Mutahi Kagwe. He has done a good job. And I don't know, because he was appointed recently. And the way he has taken his job very seriously. And he has always been informing the public or the citizens on what should be done and what should not be done. I think Kenyans should really listen and keenly on the directives that are given so that we can be able to manage the coronavirus as it is now. Otherwise, Kenyans must know that, yes, we are heading for tough economic times ahead, but this is something that we must bear, and then we are hoping that it will be a temporary kind of challenge. And we hope Kenya will still move on. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Joseph Rotich, economist here on my immediate right at the Center of Farah Maalim, former Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, and Dr. Alvin Juma, who is a physician. And we got the perspective from the economy, from the political end, and equally from the medical perspective as we continue to cover the coronavirus crisis in the country with regards to the efforts put in place by the government in regard to the response and the capacity in terms of our medical capacity with regards to the coronavirus crisis, which is not only a Kenyan affair, an African affair, but a global affair with regards to the total shutdowns in Italy and mostly in part of Europe and in the European Union as part of the containment measures of the fast-spreading virus across the globe. The economies of the world have taken a hit in regard to the New York Stock Exchange at some point even shutting until the injection of more than $1 trillion by the US government in an attempt to revamp the US economy. This as the positive news came out of China in regard to the shutdown or the closure of more than 40,000 health centers that were handling the coronavirus patients or suspects for that matter, as per the containment measures put in place by President Xi Jinping's government following the outbreak of the virus in the city of Wuhan in Hubei province. So we'll be here to give you an update as the government gives us with regards to you wanting to get an understanding of the COVID-2019 or the coronavirus crisis, which is a pandemic now as per the World Health Organization. And that, of course, while it remains to be our sole responsibility, we'll also be calling unto you to practice safe hygiene measures, wash your hands always, keep out of crowded areas or overcrowding in some areas, and equally apply or implement the preventive measures as outlined by the national government and equally the World Health Organization in keeping you, your family, and the Kenyan population safe. The number has been 07914789990. The hashtag on Twitter is NewDayKE. The short SMS code is 40920. We'll see you tomorrow night for the primetime news equally, as we'll be having the same discussion here on Ebru Television, and we'll leave you with the package of the day in regard to the coronavirus pandemic. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.